you mangy dogs. Swab the decks and hoist the sails. The guns on board be needing some proper manning. Pieces of 8 and a fine wench on your arm, if your work be not too shoddy. Careful not to flounder too badly, though, or you may have to dance the hempen jig as we see you to Davy Jones. Jeffy, my boy, on with the show.
Vast me hearties. To our listeners from across all regions of the planet, welcome once again aboard the Robin Hood, flagship to the world's one and only cooperatively inspired charity podcast network, WPRPN. Live streaming today from just off the shores of Korea's historic Peacetime Peninsula. You're listening to episode 106 of Pirate Radio Podcasts. I'm your host, as always, the ship's Chief Communications Officer, Jaffe Ryder. Returning to the Robin Hood once again, this week's guest is none other than Robert Vitruvian Man Homrich, a talented modern-day American Renaissance man, graphic artist, musician, draftsman, filmmaker, and author. Robert is also a dedicated student of the ancient mystery schools. His studies span a diverse range of subjects, including alchemy, architecture, astrology, astrotheology, cartography, esoteric symbolism, etymology, mythology, occult magic, philosophy, sacred geometry, secret societies, and more. In September 2015, he published his first book, The Vitruvian Code, The Secret Anatomy of Washington, D.C., and its connections to the ancient mysteries. Since the release of his book, Robert has appeared on numerous talk shows and podcasts in support of his research, and he continues to educate the masses about the secret design of Washington, D.C. Just this past April, Robert launched his own occult and conspiracy-related Stranger Than Fiction podcast, complete with detailed visual aid to help complement the show's various subject matter and esoteric themes. And it is some of those esoteric themes we're hoping to get into today, further explore, and address. However, that is if we can manage to connect with Robert via Skype. We're having some mysterious and inexplicable technical issues at the present moment. I'm not sure when the last time he actually used Skype, but we're not able to get through to him. He's not able to connect with us, and we're being left to simply soldier on here in true pirate fashion. The show must go on. Hopefully before too long he will manage to connect with us, have these technical matters cleared up, and we'll be able to bring him back on board. We were really looking forward to this. It's unfortunate, but this is just some of the things that do pop up and are dropped at some of the issues shows such as ours are forced to contend with from time to time. In the meantime, though, what we do have in store for you here, and we will talk more about Robert and the show that we had scheduled to do, some of the issues that we had intended to talk about. Let's not forget, in case you're not aware, I am, of course, Jaffe Ryder, your host, as always, to this show, Pirate Radio Podcast. And we're currently working on producing, as you probably picked up on in the introduction, episode 106. We do have waiting in the wings a bit of a surprise. Someone who's actually... he's new to this whole business, so I'm not sure how... if he managed to actually make it up into the crow's nest or not. Can be a bit of a struggle sometimes for some people. Kaiser Schuff, though, was somebody who we had invited on board here to help maybe steer things along here over the course of today's 90-minute conversation. Kaiser, did you manage to make it up to the crow's nest or not?
Aye, Chief Communications Officer Jaffe. Let me slide down the rope. I had to reflag because I saw a fat little vessel loaded. I put the Union Jack up and took down the skull and crossbones so we can get within gun range right next to him and give him a nice defilade fire. Let me come down. We'll grab a glass of grog and we will have a discussion of lusty tales of adventure, my friend.
Actually, the captain, I think what he's asked is that you spend most of the show up in the crow's nest, although hang on just a minute now. We are getting some information here in my earpiece. In fact, the captain himself, Captain Sinclair?
Yeah, Jaffe. I'll be standing by here at the ready as always, and Kaiser's more than welcome to come down to the main deck and make himself at home. Welcome aboard, Kaiser. It's been some time. Great to be able to reconnect. So, yes, you make the most of things here with Jaffe today, and we'll carry on as best we can, regardless of whether Robert's able to make it to the show or not.
Aye, Captain. And we shall have a couple mugs of grog discussing lusty tales of adventure on the forecastle.
Okay, and thank you, Captain. Thank you, Kaiser. So, well, how do things look before you do come down? So things you spotted, it sounds like you're a Union Jack. That would be the best way of doing it, I suppose. I'm not sure if we're really ready to engage here with an all-out attack in the middle of our show, but the opium that they are probably carrying on board is something that we will likely want to get our hands on, if only for medicinal reasons, of course. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Of course. No, I had to put that false flag up because we're still far enough away that I want to get nice and close because our guns are more effective as we give them a good broadside.
So, well, let's just take a look at things here from a technical standpoint and see what we're looking at. Robert has exhausted all options, it appears, from his standpoint. He is, I believe, trying to connect with us via his phone, I'd imagine. Not too clear on where it is he's based out of at the present moment. He initially, I think, of course, had been spending... Well, Grand Rapids, Michigan was one place that he had called home for quite some time. Not sure that he actually lived in Washington, D.C. itself, but he is, of course, best known for his book, The Vitruvian Code, and there's a subtitle to things as well, just basically talking about the symbolic and encoded mysteries of Washington, D.C. Don't quote me on that, folks. I'm just giving you a paraphrased version of the of what he has there as a subtitle. So, also had recently launched his Stranger Than Fiction podcast, which I had a chance to listen to a couple of the episodes that he's put together to this point. It's a relatively new show. It's just come out this past April, so he's done a lot of really great work to this point, and even managed to have a chance to speak with Freeman Fly, of all people. So how about that? We've actually been trying to have Freeman drop by the Robin Hood as well. Not sure if we're going to really make much effort in doing that anymore at this point of at this stage of the game. So we'll just have to see how that all unfolds. Whether or not we had been in touch actually with Freeman and playing a little bit of email tag and so forth, and I imagine, he's a pretty busy guy, of course, so a lot of times people with names and contact information, that sort of thing, just ends up getting lost in the shuffle. As people can see, there's a great slideshow that we've got put together here with Robert's, the pictures that some that he'd provided, others that we just simply downloaded via DuckDuckGo. Robert himself, a bit of a headbanger, it seems, back in the day. I'm not sure if he still rocks out when he gets a chance. We were looking forward, of course, to hearing a little bit about his musical history and whether he's still active these days or not. But
anyways, let's hope we can get him on. Yeah.
Well, we'll see. Fingers crossed. Okay, so it sounds like great. You managed to make it down then onto the main deck here. So, and we can maybe just kind of make ourselves at home in the recording and broadcast studios of the show that we've put together here. We've actually been running this thing for the past couple of years, if you can believe that. It's been this is our third year, amazingly enough, and a lot of people do not produce these live streams, frankly, is what it seems. Not when it comes to podcasts. Typically, a lot of what we have, that I've come across at least, the majority, it seems, are pre-recorded and then post-produced and really cleaned up. That's one of the things we do, but we also work on getting this raw feed out to the world as well, too. Not quite half a dozen people join us live here at the moment.
Well, that sounds...
Yeah, we're getting those numbers up a little bit, aren't we? So that's good.
Oh, yeah. I enjoy it. I've enjoyed listening to it since I've started listening to it, and I know the amount of work you've put into it. So hopefully people understand they're getting a high-quality podcast, probably on the scale of what like an Art Bell would have been during the day.
I've heard that a couple times, but I really don't think so. Not at least at this stage of the game. Give us a couple years, and maybe, that might make a little more sense to me. But, talk about what a good luck filling that guy's shoes.
Well, here's the thing that I tell people. A lot of people that, late night stakeouts and stuff that I had, I listened to Art Bell pretty much when he glued his own lips together on air. That happened. There was a lot of on-air hijinks that happened and technical difficulties. And it wasn't always just because somebody was flying into Area 51. Some of it was from his sourcing of the satellite and stuff like that. So, you're going to have hiccups in the infancy of it. And 3 years in the talk radio genre, Jaffe, you're doing very well. Trust me. I haven't heard those. You haven't glued your lips together yet, man.
That's yet to come, perhaps. So we'll see how things evolve here over the course of the following weeks, months, and hopefully years. Fingers crossed. Thanks once again, of course, everybody that is dropping by, tuning in live, catching us here as we do stream out across the web. Episode 106 of Pirate Radio Podcasts. This beautiful spring day here in Korea, Saturday, May 5th. Of course, back in the West. Well, it's noon here on Saturday. Back in the West, as always, we're looking at Friday evenings, 8 o'clock, 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Right.
At 11 o'clock out on the East Coast. I'm not sure if people can hear this or not. A little bit of, I guess there's some renovations taking place here on board the ship. Some furniture being moved about or what have you. Don't know if that's coming out in the stream, but that's just one of the things that we do have to deal with from time to time as we put this show together.
As our as our trusty ship, the Robin Hood, is built out of wood, you're going to hear hammering and mucking about when they're putting up a new hammock. I think we got a couple new people.
Hempen sails and rope too. Don't forget, a lot of good, great hemp quality hemp products here. So, in true classic naval fashion. So let's get a little bit into your story, Kaiser. We've actually got you booked for I think it's the 25th. Yeah, Friday the 25th. It's a pre-recorded affair that we put together there. I was just checking what we did record and set aside for the archives just the other day. It looks like everything's pretty much ready to go. We got to do some work on just cleaning things up a little bit, but the overall sound quality seems basically okay. So, very much looking forward to that, of course. But for people who don't know, and this is, I guess, this is a great opportunity because you're here now. Of course, we can kind of get a bit of a jump on things, really. You responding to our reaching out to you, saying, "Hey, we might have some issues here with our guest. Are you interested in perhaps joining this week in the event that they bail, or there are always, as we saw today, technical difficulties." So, but let's just get a little bit into who Kaiser Schuff is, your backstory, and everything else you'd like to share with our listening audience as far as those things go, and then we can maybe open things up a little more and see where the conversation leads us.
Well, that's fine. I was born in Columbus, Ohio. I went on to the Army, and then after that, the Marine Corps. Joined the Army at 17, the Marine Corps at 20. Left that, went in National Guard. I was a union iron worker and in the Guard, put myself through school. Went to my first federal agency in 2000. My second one in 2003. Contracted in 2005 with SAIC and MPRI. Training Iraqi police and doing other sundry things, and worked in Baghdad, Al-Qut, Wasat province, and Mosul during that time from January of 2005 till March of 2006, and then went back to federal service in 2007, got out of federal service again in 2009. And I've been contracting ever since. It's pretty much the basic boil down.
So you're a Fed is what you're telling us. How about that? We have a Fed on board the Robin. I'm not sure how the crew really, how comfortable the rest of the Robin Hood crew feels with this whole business. What's the deal there exactly?
Former Fed. So, I've been to FLETC. I've been to several other trainings.
Fed, former Mafia, former Hell's Angel. Come on. There's no such thing as former when it comes to maybe there is. There could be, I guess. Some people get quite disgusted, of course. And there are some good people, of course, let's not forget, that do work within government. Not everybody is, some wicked rogue type agent. There's people with good hearts and good intention, and whistleblowers as well too. Which, of course, the Obama administration. I'm not sure about Trump so much, but apparently Obama was just brutal when it came to truth tellers.
He relentlessly went after him with DOJ. Relentlessly went after him, and his whole Aid for Africa program is the reason I left working directly for the federal government. And I'm probably one of the staunchest advocates against, especially right now, federal LEO, law enforcement agencies, law enforcement officers. And I do have a caveat to that. I think the U.S. Marshal Service does a fine job. I think all DOD agencies and our border protection, CBPOs, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and Border Patrol, and Coast Guard, and Secret Service, that's all in Homeland now, folks. But DOJ, FBI, they're off the rails. And when people, it disgusts me actually when people say, as being a former Fed, when they say, oh, it's not the rank and file that are bad, it's the upper management. Well, trust me, as a rank and file guy, no matter what agency you work with, you know what upper management's doing, either through the rumor mill or what. And if something comes to your attention and you do not report it, i.e. what happened under Obama, and that's why he was relentlessly going after whistleblowers because of the corruption. And State Department, DOJ, FBI, I also believe CIA, NSA, several other little intelligence agencies, except for the DOD agencies, NSA being one of them. All they have to do with NSA is make sure they point their listening devices outside of the USA. That's their mandate. And I'm fine with them staying existing. But the rest of them, they need to go away until they can be revamped and come under the marsh. See, here's the thing people don't understand with federal LEO. DOJ and FBI didn't exist. You know how they became what they are, and most other federal law enforcement agencies is using the Marshals Act to get their 6A status. They are not in the Constitution at all. Customs and Immigration are. So is our Coast Guard. So that's just a little knowledge for you folks to realize where I'm coming from. We need to go back to a constitutional republic. We're not a democracy. Democracy is mob rule. We are a democratic republic that's based upon constitutional boundaries. And the Constitution is the handcuff to this state, capital S and small s state in the United States of America. There you go. That's my 2 cents.
Well, quite the overview. So I think hopefully most of the listeners get it, that what you're saying is there's any number of different federal agencies which really, if you look at it, are quite unconstitutional and illegitimate and should not even be in operation. So we can maybe get into that a little more later, including the history and legal status of the CIA, as far as they apparently it all relates and goes back to German roots, and that sort of thing with respect to Paperclip and the Galen Intelligence Organization, perhaps, I think is one of the other things we might want to be looking at. And so really the nation, it's been hijacked by foreign interests quite some time ago. It seems on many fronts, many levels, is when this all took place. In the meantime, though, let's just draw people's attention to the fact, bit of an update here via YouTube. We've got Robert chiming in, courtesy of Epic Proportions Media Productions. That's a channel people can drop by and visit if they want to maybe get a little more up to speed, or manage to download some of the podcasts that Pirate Bob has put together over the last month or so now, really, since launching his Stranger Than Fiction podcast back in April. What he says here, though, is, "Sorry guys, I guess Skype really doesn't want me to do this interview. Never had difficulties like this with Skype." Interesting. And what we've shared here in the YouTube chat is funny how this has been going lately with our show. Every guest getting hashtag cock blocked. Last week with Morningstar, major electronic interference. Blocked here on YouTube. That's from text chatting. We have to constantly refresh and reload the browser in order to text chat with the Pirate Radio Network channel that we have in place here, as well as the fact that Podomatic is now giving us issues so that we can't upload. Well, we can upload our podcast to Podomatic, but once you've done that, there's no chance of editing anymore. You can't do hashtags, so that people can't find you if they do like a keyword search. So on top of that, though, we're basically just getting hit on every front, it seems, frankly. Almost every front. So, yeah, it's there's a battle underway here for sure. It's a war for a battle for people's hearts and minds. And
it's an info war for real.
Oh, it is. It is. We're keyboard warriors, I guess, in the sense of it's, freedom of speech. Here you go. Check this out. Check that out. And then the whole fake news thing, of course, too, which is a lot of, like, what the hell's that all about? Yeah, there's fake news, but what is fake news in the first place? Like, how do you define fake news?
Well, I've come to a decision a long time ago. This is in 2005. Well, even during the first Gulf War, but when the clarity really struck was in, it would have been November of 2005. We got ambushed. A bunch of things happened. This is in Mosul. That's the place I used to call the most violent place on the planet. And had to take the guys who got hit to the medical center once we hit Camp Merez, and they all had like whiplash injuries. There was a lot of backstory to it. I don't want to get in and bore the people with it on how this actually occurred, because it was preventable, trust me. And it was because of a bias of a staff NCO that caused it directly, and I made that very clear later. But anyways, as we're sitting in the chow hall after picking them up, and, they got their little neck bands and whatnots, around them. They showed the Humvee in Mosul burning, and they announced that 5 military policemen were dead. And I looked at them, because Merez has an airfield, and I said, hey, they said you're dead on TV, man. Go home. Give it up. And I never watched TV, and that was CNN who did that. So, honestly, this is the info war, and there's an old adage in the military. If you're getting flack, that means you're over the target. Hopefully you guys understand what I'm saying, and I think Jaffe more than understands it now.
Yeah, the flak is always heaviest when you're directly over the target. Robert Homrich, it looks like we have you finally managed to join us here. Rob Noxious, 75, welcome to the Robin Hood. It's great to have you back.
Hey, man, sorry about that. I don't know what happened there.
Well, I just checked this, Rob Noxious 75, and I don't know why, but apparently I had you blocked. If you can believe that. So your other account, Robert Homrich, we're trying to communicate there, not a problem, of course. But yeah, don't ask me why you were blocked. I don't remember blocking you, or maybe one of the things is I constantly get all kinds of Russian spam being sent my way, and it gets to be a real issue, of course. So maybe I got you confused with some Russian spammer, or who knows. But anyways, you're here now. It's great to have you back on board. Maybe, Kaiser, we can get you to head back up onto the crow's nest there. We've got about another, well, we'll run things through for the next hour or so, at least, I'd imagine, just to, make a good show with things.
We can make up for the lost time. I've got no problem with that.
You betcha. So
I heading back up to the crow's nest. Bye-bye, guys.
Yeah, ahoy, matey. So, yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it? A little more than a year. Last December 2016, I was just checking the archives there. It's show number 42, if people want to go back and check what we have recorded and set aside there for the archives. So what have you been up to since then, my friend?
Oh, I've been doing lots of, whole lot of nothing, really. I actually launched a new podcast, and that's kind of been my main focus. And of course, I'm always forever promoting the Vitruvian Code and that stuff. So that's going to be a lifelong, ongoing thing as well. So,
yeah, we've actually plugged your podcast here a couple times already since we started this week's stream. So, Stranger Than Fiction podcast is the title, and you've had several shows you've managed to put together in the last month or so. What can we expect to see as far as the future is concerned? What else do you have in store?
Well, right now, it's really been an experiment. I don't know if I'm going to continue doing it or not. It's very time consuming because it's I look at it as more than just a podcast. I try to, supply a lot of visual aspects to it as well. And it's very, very time consuming. I don't know if I'm going to be able to budget that into my schedule, but I have been enjoying doing it. So I am going to try. I might need to lighten it up or make some modifications, but otherwise I would hope to just continue doing the same thing of what I've already done, which is basically have a guest in every week. It's like one of the things I've noticed personally from doing a lot of podcasts myself and appearing on other people's podcasts is simply, like with the Vitruvian Code, there's a lot of visual involved with, trying to explain it. And without that visual accompaniment, it can be a little bit difficult to follow. And so I wanted to try and create a podcast that kind of gave you that visual aid right along with what we're talking about as we're talking about it. So that was kind of the goal with the show, and I like the way it's come out so far. It's a very time consuming thing, and I'm not getting paid for it either. So I mean that really kind of takes away from me doing the other things that I could be getting paid for. So it's kind of a trying to keep everything in balance and see if I can make it all work.
It does take a lot of work and a lot of time, and it's I've noticed we have to have a real passion for these things that we do on the side as hobbies, mostly because of the lack of real, there's no significant income involved generally.
Sure.
So, but that's fine. And I think even the word amateur apparently means there's some connection there with the sense of having a love affair with whatever it is that you do. You're an amateur magician, sure, or cook, or whatever it is, sailor, or you name it. And it's because there's something within you that is, I guess, stirred from a spiritual or emotional standpoint that really, it's kind of almost like steering us and directing us, telling us that this is our calling, this is what you should be doing. Stick to it.
Sure.
And you notice that over time you continue to improve as well too. There, at least that's been our experience here via the Robin Hood. So you've managed to archive a couple shows so far. You even had Freeman Fly on board. We've as we were talking about earlier, just with as we kind of kick things off there, we've been in touch with Freeman and still waiting kind of to hear back from him, a little bit of email tag or what have you, and we'll see how things go here over time, of course. No rush. But, the first podcast you put together, I'm not sure how much post-production you did to that. It sounded like you might have taken a break once or twice just to kind of catch your breath and maybe put a few notes together as far as what next you wanted to talk about or discuss. But it sounded great. I really enjoyed listening to it. Then there was the Oak Island, the guests that you had on as well too.
Sure, with Portland.
Why don't you talk a little bit about what you have produced so far, courtesy of your podcast, then, with these guests, and just once again, what more you hope to have basically presented to the public over the course of the following months and hopefully years.
Sure. Well, the first episode, I felt it was appropriate to kind of introduce myself and do my own story with. So that's kind of what I did there. And I kind of give you the rundown of the Vitruvian Code, the secret design of Washington, D.C., and how that all fits together and what it all means. And I tried to squeeze it into an hour, so it's very condensed, but I still feel like it came out very well. And that one was a little more scripted than it usually is, just because the concept behind the show is to part interview show, part presentation. So sometimes I do presentations, sometimes I interview, and the two are very different, and I approach them very differently. And that one would fall under the presentation kind of guidelines. So there was a little post-production editing in that as well. It obviously comes through. But the first show was all about just kind of introducing myself and going through DC, and then from there I brought in some guests, and I started with some who actually kind of had a big impact on with what I was doing in the Vitruvian Code. So my very first guest was Scott Onstadt, who did a film I'm sure a lot of your listeners are familiar with called Secrets in Plain Sight. And that actually was a lot of the inspiration behind my own work, was just from watching his film. And anybody who watches my presentation will see that I go into the details of how that really kind of directed me and my work initially, was just from watching his film. So it was great to have him on, and we kind of went over some of his research and stuff. And then from there, like you said, I had Freeman Fly on, who he was very integral and very key part of me really getting that on that higher platform and reaching a bigger audience. Without him, I'd still be, just on my little soapbox. So he was very instrumental in getting my name and my story out there. And so he was the natural second guest for me. And then my third guest was actually Court Lindahl, who he actually wrote the foreword for my book. So I started with those three for very specific reasons, because they were all very instrumental in the Vitruvian Code coming to fruition and reaching the people. And then, of course, in the future, I intend to do a whole lot of other stuff. I have begun producing a couple other episodes. One is on Rennes Le Chateau, and I've done one on the Mandela Effect. And I also have plans for a show on Denver Airport. I actually have some information about Denver Airport that's never been covered in any videos before. So, but I'm saving that. I can't really go into the details on that one yet. So but basically, it's about all those weird things. Every show is going to be about a different subject. All those weird little things that kind of make you go,
Yeah, so that's really great, and we're, of course, all of us looking forward to what the future may bring as far as Stranger Than Fiction is concerned. In the meantime, though, why don't we just back things up a little bit? I'm kind of up to speed, of course, and in the loop and in the know as far as your backstory is concerned, with respect in particular to your spiritual path and I'm not sure how much it was. It sounds like quite a significant awakening, but you had a bit of a medical incident that took place, in fact, which ended up being, I guess, almost like a near-death experience. Up until that point, how spiritual had you been, really? I mean, you do, I guess, at this stage, consider yourself spiritual, a true Renaissance man, of course, as we laid it out, for our listeners there, with such a wide range of interests and skills in so many different departments, of course. But with respect to your near-death experience, if you could just go into that a little bit, talk, just share with us your thoughts on spirituality, and had you been a real spiritual person at that point or not?
Sure. Well, that definitely was a key turning point for me. I think I don't like the terminology near-death experience, because with as it pertains to me, there was nothing near about it. I was clinically dead. So I don't like that. I prefer the term out-of-body experience, because that's what it really was. I was no longer in my body. Before that, I can't say I was very spiritual at all. And in fact, for 12 years after that, I mean, it took a minute for me to really grasp what I had experienced. It's really hard to describe the experience that I had during that time. But a little background I'll start with, I guess, is, excuse me, I have asthma, and I was suffering from a very bad asthma attack, and I lost consciousness on the way to the hospital, and next thing you know, I'm no longer in my body, and it was a very surreal experience, to say the least. I really felt like during that time I was being guided. At the same time, I was bombarded with a great deal of information, encrypted information at that. And so that's what took me 12 years to decode, was the encrypted nature of this information. And so it was, but at the same time, I knew that I was I was being bombarded with this information. So 12 years later, that's when I happened upon Scott Onstott's film. And as I watched it, the first segment of the film kind of goes into the secret design of Washington, D.C. And just watching that film really started to trigger things for me, and things started to click in my head. And suddenly everything kind of made sense. And that's what really set me off on the whole spiritual path that I've been on since then. And that, ironically enough, that occurred on the famous date the Mayans pointed to with their calendar. It was actually right on December 21st, 2012, that things began to click. And it's been a wild ride since. Are you with me still?
Yeah, no, I'm still here. We just actually had the OBS muted so there wouldn't be too much background noise. I was multitasking while listening to you kind of just unpack and present your backstory details to the listeners. So speaking of which, we've actually got, well, we had as many as 8 people dropping in and wanting to engage us here and be a part of this week's show. So that's really great. Just going to scroll up to the top here and take a look at some of the comments they've been leaving. You can do that yourself too if you like, Robert, and just kind of cherry pick whatever you want to comment on. We do have
I don't know if I'm gonna I might end up accidentally hanging up on you if I try something like that.
Because you're on your phone, I guess.
Yes.
Sounds like you're outside.
Yes.
Maybe you get better reception when you're outside. I guess that's the kind of...
maybe. I don't know. I'm actually out here so I can smoke a cigarette.
Oh, geez. And you've got asthma? I don't know if that's really... Is that the right way to do things? Or?
Now you're sounding like my doctor, but that's what doctors say, but they also use radiation to treat cancer patients, so I don't really... Ironically enough, I actually use cigarettes to help regulate my breathing. So,
have you heard of American Spirit?
Well, I guess technically, I don't really consider myself American, but I guess technically I was born here.
No. The tobacco brand name.
Oh no.
Oh, you've never heard of American Spirit? Oh, okay.
No.
Oh,
no.
Check it out. I mean, if you're going to smoke, that might be something you might want to take a look at there for sure. So It's all natural. I think Bob Dylan, even apparently from what I'd heard, actually had switched over to that because, you know, how damaging some cigarette brands can be, of course, with all the tar not just the nicotine, just the additives, the chemicals and toxins.
Oh yeah,
my God.
Right.
So let's not.
Well, the way I see it, I could smoke a cigarette or I can take pharmaceuticals. Either way, and neither one of them is really doing me any good.
That's right. Yeah. So, all right, moving along.
This keeps me from ripping people's heads off, though.
You get pretty high strung and on edge, I guess. Then if you don't have your cigarettes, is what you're saying. I guess.
I can.
Let's.
I try to actually pretty laid back though. I'm
sure.
Mellow.
Let me just let's take things back to your. Now you don't like to. It's an out of body experience. Okay, so we won't use the near death experience. That terminology anymore. But
you can use whatever terminology you want. I just don't like it.
It's fine. It's no. We'll try to speak your language a little more here over the course of the balance of our conversation. So, but during this event, you are said to have what you claim is downloaded because it's a consciousness download is what you experience. Maybe you can go into more detail as far as the particulars, but the Book of Thoth, which also just because I was going back and listening to the chat that we had in December of 2016. Once again, everyone else can do that. People that are listening out there, if you go onto Podomatic and do just a little brief search for Homrich and our show, of course. But even that, on top of that, you can actually find the link to the archive show that we have in place off of YouTube, actually, in the description area that we've got put together here on YouTube, so it's as easy as that. So, but Thoth, Mercury, and Hermes. I think there's even more of a tie-in than that, but as far as these
sure,
the
Enoch.
pantheon.
Enoch would be another one.
Oh, geez, yeah, Enoch, and the Book of Enoch was apparently taken out of the Bible. So why don't we just circumnavigate, these
Well,
ideas?
first of all, let me
basically.
reiterate a little bit about that. My comment that I think you're referring to about the Book of Thoth is I was really using that as a metaphor or an allegory, just to emphasize that what I was being relayed was forbidden knowledge or hidden knowledge, if you will, occulted knowledge. Not necessarily that I was flipping through the pages of the book, but more as a metaphor in that I was being shown forbidden knowledge or secrets. So just so we're clear on that. But yeah, that's an interesting subject. Now, what specifically did you want me to go into about that?
Just your recollections, really, just any of the details you could provide with respect to this business of how it all occurred, just more of a description. Were you approached by some celestial being of some sort, or did it appear in the form of the pages, actually, paper, or and Egyptian hieroglyphs, or what was the just more of the particulars, if you will?
As far as what I experienced,
with the download, the Book of Thoth.
It's really hard to describe because it wasn't like anything that I can compare it to. It's not like an actual book. If anything, I would almost describe it as, and it's really kind of a stretch from what it really was, but the best I could do would be to describe it as almost like mathematical equations, but yet that's not really right either. How do you describe encrypted information? Not really language, not really imagery, but just frequency, but almost like in the form of numbers. But it's not really. I really have no way to really truly describe what it was like. In my book, I think I described it as like just being bombarded with mathematical equations, but yet it was like power spitting itself out of a down power line. I mean, it's really hard. It's a really tough one to address because I don't have anything really to compare it to. But it was very electric, let's say. It was certainly electric. It was like being struck by lightning, in an instant and for an eternity. It was the best I could say is what I've described already. I mean, it's one of those things you really can't grasp until you've experienced it, and even then, it's hard to wrap your head around, which is probably why it took me 12 years to really kind of start grasping it at all.
Well, hang on, 12 years. I thought that this all took place in 2010.
No, actually, the out of body experience was in the year 2000, and it was in December of 2012 that I finally figured and kind of pieced everything together, and that's when I really had my first breakthroughs with the Vitruvian Code. Was on December 21st, 2012, which I find incredibly ironic as well.
How about that? So we're talking the winter solstice.
Yes, the winter solstice, the date the Mayan calendar ended, which everybody thought was going to be the great apocalypse actually means an unveiling or disclosing of hidden knowledge, and it's not the end of the world like everyone thinks it means. The true original definition of apocalypse was an unveiling or disclosing of hidden knowledge, and of course they attached the end of the world to that to kind of veer people away from wanting to understand the apocalypse. So in that sense, you could say that the Mayans maybe were actually right spot on. And I'm not just saying with regards to me. I know a lot of people since 2012, there has been a mass awakening People are still starting to, see the world in a different light. And so it's not just me here we're talking about. I think a lot of people are really starting to look at things differently ever since that date. So in that sense, in the true context of the word apocalypse, I think the Mayans were spot on in predicting the apocalypse.
I see. So you're saying that rather than just to be clear, then not the end of the world, of course, but more spiritual awakening. I myself have long been aware that yes, that exactly. I think we're talking the same language here, and we more or less understand it on the same sort of level, basically. But that it is from the Greek, meaning just an unveiling or a revelation, really, so that what has been, as you say, hidden for so long, ultimately finds itself coming to the surface. And we're finding that on so many levels, so many fronts, including, this is why I'm such a big fan of archaeology, because that's or Google, what is it that they have the Google Earth kind of thing? It's like, oh, look at this anomaly, look at that one. But one of the questions, and we did talk about this in our previous episode, we can maybe return to doing so again here with the time we have left. But in the meantime, what I'd like to know is, what did Freeman Fly have to say about this? Because he's gone into this business of the Mayan calendar and the apocalypse, all these sort of things for quite a few years. He must have thought this was at least of some significance, your experience and the date.
Well, sure. That's why he initially had me on the show as well, is just because Freeman, with his lineage and stuff, and his parents being involved in Freemasonry, and he's had definitely had been keeping his eyes on and his hands on Freemasonry and a lot of the other subjects that I kind of cover as well. So we really hit it off quite well, and we've kind of become pretty good friends over the years now, to the point where I don't want to kind of get anybody's hopes up too high, but he's actually we've been tossing around the idea of me actually guest hosting the Free Zone, or a couple episodes of the Free Zone here and there. So we definitely hit it off, and he definitely found my work very intriguing on a number of different levels for a number of different reasons. And of course, I do believe that's one of them. Of course, another thing that he was really seemed interested in was my overlays of the Vitruvian diagram on the Large Hadron Collider at CERN as well, which is another subject. But it's definitely been interesting, and we've had some talks over the year. He had me on his show, I had him on my show, and he's a very, very interesting person, and we definitely have a lot of common interests. So it's no surprise that he was actually really the first person to bring me on board and kind of get me out there. And I actually owe a great deal of a great debt of gratitude to him for all that he did do for me.
Well, it's a natural, to me, it's a no-brainer, really. It's a natural fit. Of course, you should be working with him. So, because of, first and foremost, because of your experience, with respect to the Mayan calendar, and then your work in the area of the Vitruvian Code, and so on and so forth. So, well, let's see. The Large Hadron Collider and CERN, I myself have speculated, just the hypothesis, that it could be potentially responsible for any number of various anomalies taking place around the world at the present time, including these large holes that are reported appearing in the ground from out of nowhere. I mean, I might be totally off base and mistaken, but another example would be the so-called trumpets in the skies, or
I think personally, I think you're missing one of the most obvious ones, which would be the Mandela effect.
Okay, let's hear about that one then. Tell us all about it.
Are you familiar with the Mandela effect?
Well, yeah, vaguely, but let's just do a recap, maybe just up to speed. What's your take on it? Let our listeners know.
Well, for starters, it gets right into quantum physics, which, I mean, that's an advanced subject. I mean, even for me, but it really delves into quantum physics. And when you think of quantum physics, I mean, we're talking about a multiverse of multiple universes. And of course, perhaps we should start really with a rundown of what the Mandela effect actually is. And it's called the Mandela effect because there are many people who seem to recall Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s, when in reality he just died a couple of years ago. But many people have vivid memories of Nelson Mandela dying in the 80s in prison. And of course, it's not limited to just that. There's a number of strange anomalies that almost feel like we're not in the same universe we started in. Tracing right down to the way Looney Tunes is spelled. Many people remember it being Looney Tunes, Toons, like cartoons, when in reality, it's always been Tunes, like a musical tune. It goes right into movie lines like Forrest Gump's "Life is like a box of chocolates" and "Life was like a box of chocolates." Many people remember it one way, but the reality says it's another way. And of course, a lot of people attribute this to false memories. But what I find interesting is there's also residues that remain. For example, I ask a lot of older people, where is the Statue of Liberty? And they'll tell you it's on Ellis Island. And it's always been on Ellis Island, when in fact it's always been on Liberty Island in New Jersey. It's not even in New York City, believe it or not. But what I find interesting about that, and I still have it, when I was a kid, I used to collect these things called garbage pail kids, and I used to have one called Alice Island, which was a depiction or a mock-up of the Statue of Liberty. And it doesn't even make sense in this reality if the Statue of Liberty is not on Ellis Island in New York City, but rather it's on Liberty Island in New Jersey. Why is there this garbage pail kid card that says Ellis Island then, in the form of the Statue of Liberty? I mean, that's basically what the Mandela effect is. Many people just kind of dismiss it as false memories, but then how do you explain some of these residues like I just explained? And there's countless examples. We could go discuss that all night long on some of the different examples. But I think I've given you enough a rundown, and anybody can just go on YouTube and look at it and look up some of these examples, and it's kind of astonishing, and it really ties right in there with quantum physics and multiple realities. And then you consider what CERN is doing. Is it possible that we are in a position where we're merging with alternate realities? And that's why we have this things like the Mandela effect, things like that, some of the other things that you're describing as well. Kind of makes you wonder.
A couple questions coming in for you here via the YouTube live streaming peanut gallery. The first one being, does he experience synesthesia? I'm not sure if you know what that is or not. And the second question is whether you see a link to how globalists use all media, academics, and government agencies to push an agenda. Why don't you tackle the first one first, and the
actually,
second?
if they can clarify if I'm right, is that the one where they the person will take on or remember talents or skills from a previous life? And if I can get them to clarify that, I'll go into that. And then the other question was the elites using the. That became very quickly apparent to me when I first started putting the Vitruvian Code together. I mean, first of all, you think, this is a big story, right? I mean, there's how many countless books and TV shows and documentaries and films trying to decode Washington, D.C. And here I did, and I tell you that my work has made absolutely 100% absolute perfect sense out of every single anomaly that occurs in Washington, D.C. Okay, so we've got years and years and years worth of documentaries, films, books, and all this mass media trying to decode Washington, D.C., and here I am, made perfect sense of everything. You think that's a big story, especially when you consider like Dan Brown's novel is the second most successful novel in the history of the planet. And here there's so many different correlations with that as well. You'd think it'd be a big story, right? Well, think again. Nobody was interested. Why is the History Channel not interested in what I have to say? And the answer is simple. It's because it's the truth, and they don't want you to have the truth. They want you to keep guessing. They want you to keep wondering, because if you knew the truth, that the Washington, D.C. is essentially the world's largest magic sigil, created in the likeness of your very own personal voodoo doll, well, gosh, you would certainly tend to look at the world very differently. And so, yeah, it's a no-brainer that the elites most definitely are using mass media to their advantage. And it's certainly to keep this planet enslaved, as it has been for thousands of years. And then as far as the...
Well, truth will out is what Kaiser Schuff is typing to us here via the crow's nest. Speaking of which, maybe it's time to have him join us again here in just a second, if we can patch on through. Let's see if we can... Kaiser, do we have you up there? How are things looking for your vantage point there? You managed to get all settled in?
Oh yeah, I'm thinking I'm loving what Rob's saying. So I'm enjoying it. And yeah, you answered my question the same way I have. I loved the one picture you had where you're at the one block. It looks like over at the Georgia Guidestones. Looks like you're getting ready to urinate on it, and I understand what writing that is, so you see the tie-in. That's all I'll say.
Sure, that was a good photo op, I thought.
Why don't you talk? Why don't you talk a little bit about the Georgia Guidestones then, and the history of when you visited, and just a few of your thoughts on the whole history and matter. If you're not interested in getting into this whole synesthesia business first, it's
yeah. If I can get a definition of that, I think
Well, we've shared the link with you here in the in Skype. What I'll do though is a quick rundown. Synesthesia is a perceptual phenomenon in which, and it had nothing, I don't think, to do with what you're talking about earlier. Although there might be a tie-in on some level, who knows? Because once you bring reincarnation into the picture, it really changes everything in a sense of who knows who we were in a former life. We could have been a man or a woman or a black or a green or a pink person, who knows? So anyways, it's a perceptual phenomenon in which stimulation of one sensory or cognitive pathway leads to automatic, involuntary experiences in a second sensory or cognitive pathway. People who report a lifelong history of such experiences are known as synesthetes. But what I think it has to do with, just to, in a nutshell, frankly, is you hear colors and you see sounds, that kind of deal, where your synapses are... they're back. You're wired all backwards. I guess is one way of looking at it, maybe.
See that's what's interesting about the Vitruvian Code, is that I created the diagram before I understood what I created. So I guess that answers the question perfectly right there, in that whole diagram was completed before I even understood the symbolism of it. So without a doubt, I guess the answer to that one is absolutely. If anybody's listening actually looks at that artwork that I created, there's a lot of symbolism overload going on there. And it's all age-old, centuries-old symbolism, too. And, I mean, I created that diagram before I understood any of it. So I think that's kind of the proof in the pudding as far as that goes.
Circling the square, I think, it's a term that you often like to use. You can maybe flesh that one out a little more.
Sure. But, squaring the circle it's synonymous with doing the impossible. Of course, that's the age-old riddle of creating a square with the same area as a given circle. Sorry if the neighbor's dog's getting a little loud here.
Oh, yeah, that's all part of the show. That's what,
Sure.
the live streams. It's all kinds of things pop up from time to time. But also, just quickly before you go into more detail on if you so choose regarding this issue, that the term or the little kind of catchphrase expression, for those with eyes to see, ears to hear, eyes to see. So these secrets in plain sight, as I believe this one documentary filmmaker that you referenced earlier, just looking for his name, Scott Onslaught, that was the name, I believe, the Secrets in Plain Sight. Is that? Yeah, that's right. So sure. Yeah. It's right there, for those with eyes to see. It's right in front of you, right in your face, but you don't. People don't see it. They don't get it.
That's how they operate. You see, the elites are telling you their plans. They've been doing it all along. They're doing it with the Georgia Guidestones, a great example you mentioned earlier. They're telling you, and it's part of they're obligated to tell you, because then that gives them plausible, or not plausible deniability, but that's their reasoning. It's like, well, you can't complain. I told you. I mean, it's the same thing the Nazis used. Well, how did you get away with that? Well, nobody complained. Nobody complained about what we were doing. Well, the elites look at it like this. If they tell you their plans and you don't object, then obviously you don't have a problem. I mean, same thing in the legal system. Silence is acquiescence.
Wow, that's one of the issues we were hoping to get into a little more with you as well, too, this time around. The straw man, legal fiction, naval admiralty law, all those kind of good things. So maybe we could save that for a few minutes later down the road. Let's not forget that one. Did you want to just...
Sure, well, definitely can get back into that. And language is another one that we can go into as well, because we kind of been touching upon secrets of language as well. So those are two things we could kind of lead into a little bit. But really, I mean, it's exactly the elites are telling you this because it gives them that's their out to say. It's just like the Nazi. Well, nobody objected to what we're doing. We're telling you, we told you in Back to the Future we were going to do 9/11. We put the date right on Neo's passport in the Matrix. I mean, they're telling you. They're going out of their way to tell you, but they're doing it through the symbolism so that you're not going to pick up on it, so that only those with the eyes to see will pick up on it. And usually those with the eyes to see are the initiated, and the initiated are part of their group. So you're a card-holding member, normally. But now, since 2012, it seems like there's been a lot of people like me who've kind of infiltrated their group, and we can kind of see the bigger picture. So I really think, it's part of their disclosure. They're disclosing their plans. Predictive programming, they call it.
Revelation of the method. That's another.
Yes.
Yeah, you betcha. So, and there's one other related coming to mind. It's fine. So, any attempts as of late with the Masons making efforts to recruit you, to bring you into the fold, and
last time it was straight up Illuminati. They were actually trying to recruit me now, and I mean, straight up legitimate Illuminati.
And how do you? How do you know that they came out and said, "Hi, I'm with the Illuminati. Here's my membership card.
Basically,
how you doing?"
Yeah, it was basically a guy came out, said he was instructed to contact me, and he wanted, I still have the Illuminati application form. I never filled it out. I never turned it in, but
there's a few of those floating around on the internet as well. I'm not sure if it's the same one that I'm thinking of exactly, but it's some pretty heavy stuff. Speaking of recruitment and so forth, Joe 333 is asking about, well, a whole number of things, but stating that he teases Freeman to run for president. He has the bloodline. Why not? What of yourself, Rob? Have you looked into your bloodline?
Well, I've looked into my bloodline a little bit. I can actually tell you that I actually have ties both to Mary Lincoln and Martha Washington. Not George Washington or Abe Lincoln, but their spouses. I actually have a direct lineage to them. So I have looked into it a little bit, but not to the extent that I would like to. Some other interesting things I can note is I have Lucille Ball in my family history, as well as Johnny Appleseed, who you might think is actually a legend, but he's actually the real deal, and he was my great uncle.
Oh, that's awesome. How about that? Isn't that?
They do have some interesting characters.
Yeah, one of the shows that we're working on producing actually here, the titles that we had in mind was 6 Degrees of Bacon. So everyone has heard about the 6 degrees of separation. There's also, of course, the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. We kind of merged the two and brought them together and just played around with things. So yeah, 6 degrees of Bacon, and really that's all it is, folks. From the lowliest of slaves and serfs to the highest of kings and popes and so forth. But bloodlines are instrumental, really key to recruitment, are they not?
I do believe so. In fact, I think the proof is in the pudding when you learn that all of our presidents can be traced back to one European king.
That's Charlemagne.
Every single one of them except one.
Charlemagne, correct?
I believe it was. I'm guessing, but that seems to ring a bell. It sounds right.
Okay. So, all right, a number of different options here as we sail along over the course of episode 106, Pirate. I am, of course, your host, as always, the ship's Chief Communications Officer, Jaffe Ryder. We've got Robert Homrich back with us again, visiting the Robin Hood. It's been a while. December of 2016 was the first time he managed to drop by. So at that point, he had actually found himself on the road and had pulled over, I believe, at some sort of truck, like a rest stop of sorts. And I think we have a little better phone connection this time, so that's great. That'll make the post-production end of things a little easier. Quite getting hit up on multiple fronts here, including the YouTube chat via the Peanut Gallery, Skype, and so on and so forth. But let's see, a number of different talking points here. Well, you've got a YouTube channel. Let's get into that a little bit, because one of the things that I saw, and I didn't check out the video, it looked quite interesting, but it's got nearly almost 1 million views, about 800,000 really, and it seems to be you by some sort of municipal, civil, or a city officer trying to give you a ticket of some sort? What's the deal there? What are we looking at?
I haven't looked at it lately. I didn't realize the numbers were up that high. Yeah, it went viral a while ago, and it's just been climbing ever since. That was the day I got arrested for asking questions. That was an interesting one. My girlfriend and I were in transit. We were planning on starting a tour company in Washington, D.C., and so we were house hunting, and we ended up in a town called Winchester, Virginia, and she very quickly got a bogus parking ticket. Now, I personally put money in the meter. I know that the meter gave us 20 minutes. We took a 10-minute walk, came back, got in our car, and drove away, and that's when she realized she got a ticket. So I went to the parking authority to ask them some questions. And it's all on video. It's all there for everyone to see, including the entire court case, which was a complete farce. And so I went there and asked some questions, and they didn't like the questions I was asking because they exposed their criminality, and I was videotaping it, and they didn't like that. And so rather than answering my questions, they chose to arrest me, claiming I was trespassing. And that's a whole interesting story, because it's ironic that the police actually directed me to take my questions there before I ever even went there. So how I was trespassing, I'll never understand. So basically, the trailer's got 1 million views, but the video of the court case has very few views. And I find that kind of interesting, but obviously it's a longer video. But if you watch that video, you're gonna see everything, all the evidence, the court trial, the incident itself, testimony. And basically, I just went in there and made an absolute mockery of them and their farce of a court system. And I basically obliterated the prosecution's case. And naturally, the judge just didn't like what I was doing, so he just tried to pretend everything I was saying was invalid, even though, I mean, clearly, I mean, he even agreed that the officer was lying on the witness stand, and then proceeded to allow him to do it anyway. And so basically, at the end of the day, I just kind of had to dismiss them as criminals and walk away from it all. And that's basically what I did.
You just exited the courtroom completely unmolested.
Right. Well, because I had exposed the judge on the stand, on the bench. I had exposed him contradicting himself.
Oh, yeah.
How can you be a fair and impartial judge
they can still,
when you contradict yourself?
Yeah.
And it really...
Sure.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying that still they can, with now the American, I really rarely do I ever refer to these things as justice systems, because that's all bullshit, of course. I think we all understand that. They're legal systems. Sure. And a lot of bad laws, too, let's not forget. So, which is a far cry from justice. But I'm pretty sure I've seen, enough videos, and there are enough cases where you find the bailiffs cuffing people, or maybe even tasing them. The rare occasion getting shot, of course, some weird hijinks.
It's dangerous to be right when the government's wrong, don't you know?
Voltaire, that's right.
And it really came down to two questions, and anybody can try this in any courtroom, in any scenario, and it's going to be the same thing. And it really comes down to two questions. And I asked the judge, at that key moment. So basically what you're telling me, Your Honor, is that the law, statutes, and codes in Virginia do not require my consent for them to be applicable to me. And of course the judge says, no, it doesn't require your consent for them to apply to you. Okay, great. Then what you're telling me, and then he stumbled big time because he knew.
Robert,
Robert,
let's just put the brakes on things right there. Your stream is breaking up really badly on this end, so let's just have you back up and just to recap and restate what you're trying to say there with respect to the judge's statements and how the two questions were really he was unable to address those in a fair and just manner.
Sure. Well, it came down to two questions. Like I said, the first question was, okay, so what you're telling me, Your Honor, is that the laws, statutes, and codes of the state of Virginia do not require my consent in order for them to apply to me. And he said, of course not. They don't require your consent. I said, okay, great. Then what you're telling me is that I am the subject of involuntary servitude. Is that not? Because it's one or the other, right? It either requires your consent or it doesn't. If it requires your consent, show me the consent. And if it doesn't require the consent, you're telling me I'm the subject of involuntary servitude, meaning I'm not a volunteer here. I have to abide by what you say. And in other words, another word for involuntary servitude, you and I know more commonly as slavery, which is illegal. So he could not answer that because he already said it doesn't require my consent, which is implying that I am the subject of involuntary servitude. But he can't come out right out and say it because slavery is illegal. And if he says, yeah, I'm a slave, well, then there's legal ramifications for that. So I caught him in that contradiction right there. And so, I basically said, okay, well, it's either one or the other. You're obviously contradicting yourself. And if you can't get through this case if you can't, how can you be impartial if you're contradicting yourself? I see no choice but to just leave this all behind and just laugh this off as a bad joke with no punchline. Have a good day. And I walked out.
Well, that's just great.
So,
that's beautiful.
But that applies to every court case ever. It's a simple thing. Well, it's the Mark Stevens approach. Is there any evidence to show that the laws, statutes, and codes apply to me?
Now, is this on the basis of common law?
I put a new twist on it.
Common law, yes. Natural law, naval admiralty law. In Korea here, we have a German system, and I've been wanting to get someone on the show that can kind of maybe just lay things out for us here and how the two compare, the naval admiralty law versus this Germanic system, which was brought in, I guess, following the end of the Korean War, which technically I guess we didn't have until maybe about just last week from the sounds of things. So but yeah, so where do things stand exactly then? Is it common law, natural law? What are we looking at? On what grounds is it? Because you're exposing the illegitimate nature of things, and how really it's all just a major fraud, of course, written down on paper.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, yeah. What more can you tell us then with respect to this legal fiction and the straw man fallacy?
Well, I mean, I basically summarize it right there. But you got to ask yourself. See, this is what I find interesting. Is let me ask you, why do you think it's called a straw man?
Voodoo.
Voodoo, yes, because the straw man is made out of a voodoo doll is made out of straw. And so, why do you think they're called magi straits?
Whoa, how about that for a little prefix, a little, linguistic cognate.
Sure.
Yeah.
I said we were going to get into language too. Magical strategist. That's what a magistrate is. Why do you think he sits there in his little black robe and summons you to appear before him?
That sounds like
magic. We're talking magic.
That's magic.
We're talking
sure.
Occult magic. Absolutely, all the way, 100%. It's magic. That's why he will give you a sentence. Sentences are rights, as in R-I-T-E-S, rights. You know, it's all goes right into the language. That's why they have their own language, legalese, and they're using magic. It's magic. It's black magic. Ball worship. What does a religion take? It requires a belief in authority. They have their own temples. They have their own religious leaders. We have the same thing here in our courts. They're using black magic.
Yeah, cultic worship and practices, the rites, as you say. What is a tie-in? Speaking of black magic, there must be a tie-in to Saturn here somewhere, I'd imagine, that you're aware of.
With the courts, there's got to be. You're probably right, but I couldn't put my finger on it right off the bat. But I mean, maybe I can do some homework next time I come on. I'll have a good answer for you. But right off the bat, I don't know. Nothing's coming right to mind.
Right.
Essentially, when you get right down to it, it's like you said, it's admiralty law, and any courtroom you go into and you see that gold fringe around the flag, you know you're in an admiralty courtroom. Now. So I mean, it's complete total fraud entirely. I mean, it is what it is. But the reason more people don't pick up on it is because we really are under a spell, and that ties right back into the Vitruvian Code, which, you know, you want to talk about voodoo, you want to talk about straw man. Well, that's what the Vitruvian man represents. Washington, D.C. It's your straw man. It's your very own personalized voodoo doll created in the likeness of you. And so we're talking, once again, just like in the courtrooms, we're talking about magic, occult magic. In this case, it's sigil magic, just like we find on the money.
Why is it with so many legal documents you are expected to, I wouldn't say required, because that calls for our consent, of course, which, you know, it's one of the issues, the kind of crux of what we're talking about here. Do you understand? No, I do not stand under what you are saying. I never will. Right. Thank you. Go away.
Understand means to stand under the authority. No, sir, I overstand. That's what I would say. I overstand.
Sure. Yeah.
And so yeah, there's lots of little words there that they're using that people don't realize what they mean. Like, for example, one of the classic go-to examples is person. And in a courtroom, that doesn't mean the same thing it means outside of the courtroom. Of course, outside of the courtroom, you know, people think that word means, you know, you or me, a living person. But in a courtroom, a person can refer to Walmart. Walmart is a person in a courtroom in the legal world. And then, so what it really comes down to is they trick you into believing that you're a corporation. It's all through the birth certificate. The birth certificate's fraud, in that the day you're born, they create a voodoo doll, your straw man. They create this birth certificate, this thing that looks like you, and, you know, it appears to be you. It's described just like you. It's got the same name. And so, I mean, when you really think about it, what is a name? It's just a name. When you go into a courtroom, though, they're going to ask you, are you a name? And your natural response is, because of the way you're educated, is to say, yes, I'm a name. Like, for example, I walk into a courtroom. They say, are you Robert Homrich? My natural response is to say, yes, I'm Robert Homrich. But the correct answer is no, Robert Homrich is a name. Nothing more, nothing less. I'm called Robert Homrich, but that's not who I am. I'm so much more than just a name, you know? And so in that way, through their little wordplay, their trickery, that's how they trick us. And of course, the Bible warned us about this a long time ago with the Tower of Babel, which is why we are all speaking Babel. We don't understand the words we're speaking. It's all deception. Of course, you read the Tower of Babel story, and that's the story of where the fallen angels came down, and they're telling you right there that the angels came and corrupted our language. And so we're all speaking Babel, especially in the courtrooms, and they use that to their advantage. All through trickery, wordplay, and semantics.
You know, it's interesting. People talk about the Bush-Clinton crime syndicate. I guess you could say, you know, Bush-Obama-Clinton crime syndicate, because they're all basically the same. It's all the same kind of, they're all part of the same team, more or less. Sure. But people talking about the drugs and the oil and the guns. But the bottom line, I guess, the number one industry that they've invested themselves in is the private for-profit prison system. That's where they're making, that's where they're raking in all the bucks. So the story goes.
Oh, yeah.
But on top of that, let me just say, before we kind of, this gets lost in the mix, that the Black's Law Dictionary, you're talking about person earlier, with respect to this, the word human itself, I guess if you look into
monster,
it's Black's legal, the dictionary there, it's a monster. It's what the hell? What's that all about?
Well, look at humanity and tell me we're not.
Well,
we are monsters.
Well, who wrote this book? Who put that book together? The Black's the Law Dictionary. There. What's the history or the heritage, the roots there of that one exactly? Any idea?
I'm not exactly sure on that one. I'm curious on that one myself. I'm going to have to do some research because I haven't really looked at the origins of the Black's Law Dictionary, but it is. Does seem to be a go-to dictionaries for the legal world, although I would recommend other dictionaries like maybe Bouvier's law dictionary over Black's Law Dictionary. But yeah, there's some interesting definitions in there, to say the least, and it really gives you a whole different perspective on the legal system itself and how they conduct it.
Bouvier, as in Jacqueline Kennedy Bouvier. She was quite an aristocratic lineage. I'd imagine that that's one of her probably relatives there we'd be looking at.
I would not be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
1 or 2 degrees.
It seems to be a
bacon.
Small club.
Oh yeah. It's a how did George Carlin? It's a big club, and you're not in it.
Okay, but you're not in it. Right.
And I are not in the big club.
I like to
big.
I like to quote Tesla as well. You got to have a membership card to get inside.
Is that Elon Musk's Tesla, or is that Nikola Tesla?
No, the band Tesla. It's actually
right.
That was a cover song. I don't even think they actually wrote the song, but. It's the line from the Tesla song. Signs.
We actually played
signs
that
everywhere. Signs.
Sure, there you go. We actually played that with the last show that we put together with you back in December of 2016, episode number 42 of Pirate Radio Podcast. Once again, people can easily. There's the link in the description there that we've added, courtesy of Podomatic, which we're having some problems with as of late, unfortunately. So that's a bit of an issue, but it's still there in the archives. And we got hit up on YouTube. We've been completely demonetized. Our entire channel, 0.
That was a flagship song for me as well with the Vitruvian Code and my and I got flagged for that as well for using that song. But I don't care. It was worth it. The song fits. If the shoe fits, wear it. So.
All right. Well, I'm just looking at the
and
clock.
YouTube is definitely. What's that?
Oh, go ahead. No, finish your thought, please.
I didn't have one. I was just kind of rambling on.
You were going to talk about YouTube, I believe.
Oh yes, YouTube. They're definitely cracking down. They obviously don't like the truth. So obviously, I mean, I think everybody's pretty well aware of what Facebook and YouTube are really cracking down on the truth movement and censorship and demonetization. I think I don't know a single person in my genre of what we're doing out there that hasn't been demonetized.
Well, we're working on actually, speaking of YouTube and the like, we're encouraging everyone to head on over to Steemit to put together a DTube or DLive account, which all that really calls for is an email and a username and password, same as pretty much any other platform that there is out there. But the DTube and DLive does tie into Steemit, where you can generate, I guess, Steam power or Steemit points. I'm still not really too up to speed on that, although I have found myself here personally that with over on minds.com that we're doing a lot better there as far as receiving digital tokens and credit. So they have recently launched their crypto token over on minds.com as well. Unfortunately, I'm not sure when the last time is that you checked back with them, but you're not, the last time at least, you were not overly impressed with what you found over on minds.com, I guess. Is that
well, for me, the big thing is really, it's just the time involved in building up an audience on each of these different platforms. I mean, to build an audience on Facebook's taken me years and years, and it's like Facebook turns out to be a lame duck, and so now you got to take it somewhere else.
Well, Robert, but here's the thing, my friend, is that with you being over on Minds, you would certainly be on our radar. We have got, and we're not the biggest channel over there by any means, but we've got over 500,000 views now in the course of just, I don't know, it's been, 2 years or so? You know, so and on top of that, when you do kind of find yourself tied into our little network over there of friends, associates, and fellow pirate mateys, that we are happy to remind your content on a pretty regular basis, as much as we can manage, get it on to our own channel, as well as just out there for the general public to see, posting it in other groups that are related to esoteric issues, let's say, or what have you. We even did a little promo thing there, linking today's show in the Washington, D.C. group. So, what you can see is what I'm trying to say is that once you sign up and get on board, that we can help to show you the ropes and work on doing what we can to better get your name out there. And we've done that, I think, somewhat successfully in assisting others to this point and doing the same kind of thing. So anyways, the invitation is there, the door is open, but it's completely your call whether or not you because it's so different than outfits or platforms like Facebook. It's a world of difference. And I'm not sure if the Minds app they've done some work with the phone end of things, but I do most of my work and activity here via just a simple a laptop, basically, and that works really well. Go ahead. I guess you lost. I was just kind of a stream of consciousness regarding Minds and whatnot. You can maybe check it out with the playback that we put together here. Yeah. Or just the YouTube stream as it's recorded. Now, just looking at the time, trying to figure out how long it is that we've actually had you on board here for. I know it's pretty late out there in the Eastern time zone. Where exactly are you located these days? Originally, of course, Grand Rapids, Michigan. And we want to hear a little bit more, of course, about your URLs, contact information, all that kind of good stuff. Do you have your tour website in place? It's mysterytours, I believe, .com.
No, actually, that kind of came to a screeching halt when I had those legal problems in Virginia. So it pretty much became more than clear to me that if I attempted to do something like that, they would bring attempts upon my life. They did that while I was incarcerated, in fact. So.
You
that
were.
Yeah.
Excuse me. You were locked up. You were in jail for a little while.
Oh yeah. Because I asked questions, they locked me up for 8 days without bond, and during that time, they assaulted me. They broke my bones, and they pretty much made it clear that I was not welcome there.
These are the inmates doing this, or the prison staff?
No, this is the staff. Absolutely.
Jesus, were there any further legal? Did you take any action as far as lodging a complaint? And it's interesting how they say lodging a complaint.
Well, what can I do?
You know,
go to the corrupt court and beg the corrupt judge to punish the people that he wanted to punish me? What am I going to do? The only action I can take is to tell him to fuck off and humiliate him on YouTube.
Yeah, well, there you go. Or as I was getting at just a little earlier there, lodging a complaint as in the Freemasons lodge, because I think in many cases that's what it boils down to. We find so many of them prominent and active within the capacity and environment of the legal systems, military, academia, entertainment, but lawyers, judges.
They're ruling the world.
Yeah, well,
they rule the world.
Well,
they've got it covered on all fronts.
Sure,
right down to the Minions cartoons your kids watch.
Well, I know you're a big Simpsons fan, as well as Rowdy Roddy Piper, which is something I wanted to talk a little bit about. But I guess with respect to the time constraints that we got here, because we are sort of running up against the clock and the 90-minute allotment that we had set aside there. You out in the Eastern Time Zone, where exactly, what city are you and state are you based out of these days?
I am currently in Grand Rapids. I don't know if I'm staying here or not, but this is where I just kind of moved back here a week ago. I don't know if I'm going to stay though. But I'm back home for a minute. I've been kind of keeping that a secret, though. I probably shouldn't be saying that on the air, but here I am.
All right. Well, we've got actually, it looks like James back up there. He's in the crow's nest. I'm not sure how things look from his vantage point. We had from the get-go here targeted and had in our sights a British, I guess it would be, not sure what side, not bigger than a galley, of course, a galleon or a warship of sorts, but as always, of course, working for the British East and West trading companies, East Indian trading companies, importing and trafficking in opium and the like, which is all legal, of course, back in the day, let's not forget. But James, we got you up there in the crow's nest. How do things look? How are things standing? And you've got a question as well, too, for Robert, do you not?
Aye, matey, I have a question, but first off, she's a fat-bellied bitch, and we will be broadsiding her soon and boarding. Now, Robert, here's my thing. Yeah. Everything you've said, I can tell you, I was a former federal cop and also an intelligence guy. What you're saying is not incorrect. It's called a fictitious person, okay?
Sure.
That's what you get with your birth certificate. And that becomes a fictitious who you are. And if you were to go into government service, which I don't believe you did, everything you will have will be capitalized. Your first name, middle name, and last name. And on your driver's license, if you doubt me, anybody listening, it will have it all capitalized. Just like
mail,
that.
Everything you get in mail.
Why is that? Yeah. I was going to ask that earlier. Maybe I did, but why is that?
That's stylization to indicate a corporation.
It is. You're incorporated, and that's why the rules of admiralty apply. And remember who I worked for, Jaffrey, from 2007 till I left under the man that I can't use a racist epithet about, who was once sitting in 1600 Avenue. So I never mentioned his name. But what I will say is what you're experiencing, honestly, I heard you say the Saturnalia thing about it. No, it's very Semitic. And that's the thing that they edit and that's why I said I understood your picture. I think you get it, Robert, on where this comes from, because all legalese, when you say Black's Law, you have to look at it a different way. It is, it's nothing but a game of words, and they, a certain tribe is very adept with using words to keep people apart, to separate people.
Well, you have
and
to
because
think go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. Well, you got to really think about it. What words are? Words create our reality.
right,
They create our ideologies, our philosophies, our religions, our laws, everything.
Spell.
They
thoughts.
create our world.
Spelling. Cast your
So-
spell.
I mean, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and all things were made through Him, is what it says. And so,
Right.
you got to really understand that when you can control the meaning of words, you can control reality, and that's why we have this manipulation of words, so that apocalypse, well, we know it to mean an unveiling or disclosing of knowledge, becomes synonymous with the end of the world. It happens with
Right.
anarchy. Anarchy just means without rulers, but we've been indoctrinated to equate it with chaos. And
Right.
there's several words like this that we could use as examples, and they're doing that to attach these negative frequencies to the words themselves. Because, in fact, when you control the meaning of words, you can control reality. And so,
Look at Aryan. Look at anti-Semitism. Those two really get it. Those are really get me really worked up, because
and
I'm not going to get
then
into it. But yeah,
and then if you look at something, there's something that certain people use called must 6 million. And this thing does indeed echo. That's where the whole echo meme came from, is it's always 6 million. It doesn't matter that it wasn't just that tribe. It was the gays. It was the trade unionists. All these people were arguing numbers, but it's always the same number, 6 million. And that's a problem. That's very problematic. And
well, it's magical. It's tied into the Talmudic magic, is it not?
Exactly.
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
That's the spell.
Funny how everything traces back to that.
That's the spell. They are committed, bound, and determined to cast upon humanity. So we've got to break the spell. There's a great minds group,
And that's what the Vitruvian Code is all about. It's all about breaking that spell.
Awesome.
That's why I encourage everyone to read my book, because I honestly guarantee you, once you read that book and you really grasp what's going on with DC, it ties right into everything: the money, the language, the legal. It really it all ties it together, and it's really the spell breaker. And I find it interesting that, I mean, you really consider and think about when I released that information and what has happened in Washington, D.C. since I released that information.
Oh,
Look, the emperor is as naked as V-Man, as I like to put it. The skeleton's out of the closet now. We've got human traffickers. We've got Pizzagate child molesters. We've got missing emails. We've got scandal all over the place. And it's all been since I released that information. So if you don't believe in magic, think again, because I really feel that putting this information out there was key to unveiling or lifting the curtain behind Washington, D.C. and all of its scandals.
Rob, I got to give you props on something, and I've never met you or read your book or talked to you before. But listening tonight, and this is just coming from a guy who just crawled down from the crow's nest, and I'm now in the forecastle. And I've got my mug of grog, and we're all sipping it together on the good ship Robin Hood. But what I will say is I heard from you things that, and this is something that Jaffe asked, when you listen to the show, you'll understand where it comes from. People were spooked because I'm a former Fed, right? Both in intelligence and as a law enforcement guy. There's a reason why I left federal service and didn't work for the U.S. government since 2009. And that was that person I do not name because I can't say it without being very upset. We human trafficked Ugandans in Iraq. And when you said slavery, that's a real thing that still is happening. We paid the Ugandan president $2,000 per head. Where does that come from? Think about it. A brother of mine who was a black man, who I worked at G8 Summit with when I was still a Fed, he said, you got to read this book. It's about what black people go through. And it was called How to Make a Slave. I can't remember the guy's name. He was a ship's captain, a slaver captain. And I had to hide it where he could leave it out there because, whatever. But where we were doing and what we were doing, the maids would report you if you had something. So I had to hide that. And it's more like a pamphlet. And this is down in Sea Island, Georgia in 2005. And the interesting part about it is I went up to him and I said, you don't understand. This is happening to us all. But I still wasn't completely woke. I wasn't completely woke. Right. I wasn't woke as fuck yet. And I did get woke as fuck in 2009 when I realized they are doing this to everybody. And that's why I've never worked for the U.S. government as a contractor since 2009.
And if more of their employees would catch on to that fact.
They are.
But if they would all catch on to that fact, I think they'd be done in a minute.
Well,
people are waking up, and that includes the people in service to the government as well. And I see it all the time. Of course, I'm looking for it, actually. So I'm definitely encountering a lot of it, and I see it. We're at it. The Mayans were right. Let's just put it that way. There is an apocalypse occurring. It's just not the apocalypse isn't what you thought it was.
Yeah, it's a transitional point. I agree with you completely, and I think
the awakening.
Well, I can't remember if it was you or Jaffe. I can't remember which, but I use on my program. I say Trump is. There's 3 rings in the circus, and I have been a ringmaster in the shit show. Okay, Trump, all he is, he's the circus master who opens the gate, opens that tent flap, and he's allowing the American people to see how the sausage is made, to see how the circus rolls.
Sure.
And that is my iconology I can use. That Trump is doing nothing more than, and honestly, I think he's ready to give everything up and just saying, American people, look at what I know. Because he's seen it from both sides. That's the thing. And both sides are working against him. So obviously,
I think it's all a work, honestly. I think Trump is part of the problem. I think he's one of them.
Okay.
I don't buy it for a second. I'm not convinced that he's on the side of the people. I liken it to I'm a big long-time wrestling fan. I've watched wrestling for a very long time. Not so much lately because their product really sucks lately, but
Rowdy Piper.
I liken what's happening. Sure, those were the good old days.
Yeah, they were.
I remember the Attitude Era, and right before that, I look at Trump like Steve Austin. You got to look at WWE. Or WWF as it was called then.
Back then.
Back in the day, Vince McMahon got caught up in the whole little Montreal screwjob scandal with Bret Hart, where he screwed him out of the title.
Mm-hmm.
And he got a lot of flack for that, and he kind of became a heel. And he used that to his advantage. That's kind of like the Illuminati kind of getting people waking up to the Illuminati, and they're starting to realize that the world's run by this Illuminati. Well, people started to realize WWE's run by this evil Vince McMahon. And Vince McMahon played that to a T, and he played off it and made millions. And what put him back on the map and kept him from going bankrupt was to bring in Steve Austin, who kind of came and stood against the establishment, if you will. Same thing with Trump. He comes here to...
Right.
The reason Trump is so anti-establishment was to get people like you and me to buy in, because we were disillusioned. We were disillusioned with government, so we needed that anti-hero to come in and give the government the proverbial two-finger salute, or the one-finger salute twice, I guess. But
I love how you used I love how you used the WWF thing, because if you remember during that time, the wrestling match between Trump and you just mentioned the name McMahon.
Yeah, Vince McMahon with the hair,
McMahon.
with the hair on the line.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
I actually wrote an article illustrating. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
If you remember during that time, and I love how you use the word Illuminati, because that's just a code word for the globalists, and we all know who the globalists are. It echoes. Sure. It's echoed throughout the centuries. And that was Trump putting down a globalist.
Sure.
And if you look back to what that was, and the interesting thing, and I'm not poo-pooing your thought, and I'm not saying you're wrong. You may be very well right. But what I will tell you is, in the deep state, and I was a part of it, I hate to say this. If you're on my Facebook, Jaffe is, he knows I'm not BSing you. I've pushed a lot of product for stuff.
Sure.
And so, yes, I want you to be a free thinker and believe what you want, but I'm just telling you, I have a different thought process because I know the pushback that's happening, and it's happening from both sides.
You've got to understand that there's a motive behind it, and the motive is to destroy what we know as America, to destroy the Constitution. See, the people were disillusioned, and we would never accept a president unless we were convinced that he was anti-establishment. And that's why we have Trump, and he's anti-establishment. But you got to ask yourself, what does Trump do? What did he do before this? He's a builder.
He's a builder, right.
He's a builder, yes.
I know.
A mason, if you will.
If you want to say that, but he was never a Masonic.
His level without being a part of the establishment.
Oh yeah, he's pulling the Trump
He's
card.
establishment. Yeah, no, he's establishment. I get that, but what I'm saying, this is where my disagreement would come, and it's slight. I don't want to argue with you over this because I love the disagreement.
Just illustrating each other's points.
Yeah. The beautiful part about it with Trump that a lot of people aren't seeing is. Well, not a lot of people. I mean, the people who know are seeing it. That's why there's an actual hot civil war going on within the IC. And I can tell you that for real. He's breaking paradigms. And, anyways, we're going to have to wrap up. I love the conversation. Sorry, I jumped out of the crow's nest, and that's it.
Well, thank you for your contributions there, Kaiser, and it's great to have you down back on the main deck of the ship here. We'll steer things back on into Skullport Harbor and the beautiful Mystic Bay, as we do here every week, courtesy of Pirate Radio Podcasts and the wider WPRPN.com network. Everyone should drop by WPRPN.com and see what it is we got cooking over there. So many great talking points and so much material that we could address and get further into here, of course, Robert. But we do have to wrap. We've got an extra hour here that we typically set aside for the after show. Know it's pretty late out there in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Your call, my friend. But before we actually do call it a night, let's get your website addresses once again, contact information, all that kind of good stuff, including the Twitter and I think mine's accounts that you do not have.
Sure. Well, the main website for the Vitruvian Code is www.thevitruviancode.com. And you can order the book there. You can get sample chapters. You can look over all the different diagrams, stuff like that. You can find me on Facebook, Robert Homrich, Homrich, and I have a YouTube channel. It's called Epic Proportions Media Productions. And what else am I forgetting? I don't have a Twitter. I do have a Minds, but I haven't been using it. I'm probably going to give it another shot here because, I've pretty much given up on Facebook. I still do use it. I still do post, but it's just not what it used to be, and I'm not real keen on that anymore or investing that much into it.
We'll wire you some crypto tokens, my friend, some Minds booster points and the like. Maybe get you clear on how that system works, basically, it's kind of cool.
Sure. And I'm willing to give it another look.
Yeah, send you a little loot. A few doubloons here, courtesy of the Robin Hood.
And I'm seeing a Steam account in my future at some point, too. I'm kind of been waiting to see which one is really, because I feel like it's long overdue for the new Facebook replacement. I don't really feel like any one really stands out yet, though. Of the two, though, I'd say Minds and Steam, it seem like they're the ones where everybody's heading in that direction. So I will probably follow the flock as far as that goes as well. It's just a matter of when.
Free thought.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Free thought, freedom of expression. And that's really what Minds.com is all about. No censorship. It's open source, and of course.
Sure. And that's exactly what's killing YouTube and Facebook.
Yep. Thank God. Thank God.
Right.
All right.
Right.
Okay. So let's just close things off then by saying that in the live YouTube, in the streaming Peanut Gallery chat here, that the Universal Consciousness Show, I believe that's Augie Nost, chiming in, talking about asthma. Robert, this might be a bit of a heads up for you here, something you perhaps have not heard of to this point, actually, but put colloidal silver in your inhaler and spray it into the lungs. It can kill the mucus and virus causing it. So, bit of a health information possibility there for you regarding colloidal silver in the fight against asthma. All kinds of great comments, of course, and we've had a few questions that our guest has fielded here over the course of this really what started out to be quite spontaneous and largely improvised episode 106 of Pirate Radio Podcasts. In fact, hang on just a second. We have got somebody, actually, the earpiece here. All right, stand by, Robert. Who is this?
Yep.
Is this the captain?
Yeah, we got the captain now.
Yeah, that's who we're talking to?
Yeah, we got the captain. Okay.
All right. So it looks like Captain Sinclair, do we have you? He was in at the start of the show there, so let's see. Captain Sinclair, are you standing by?
Hi, Chappie. Tuning in as always. Listening to the show the course of the last 90 minutes or so here. Robert, it's great to have you back. You finally managed to work your Skype out there, so that's just wonderful. And I tell you, man, the talking points you've covered here, the material, the ground is just quite amazing. So I wish we would have maybe had a little more time to talk about Oak Island. That's something that really I find personally quite fascinating. The disappearance of Templar fleet. Something worth perhaps going into a little more. Maybe you can have this addressed over the course of Rogues Gallery after show.
Oh.
Yeah, I can probably hang out for a little bit.
Well, yeah, that's looking forward to that, and I think he could, it sounds like, probably do that.
Well, I appreciate that very much.
And I thank you guys for having me aboard tonight, once again.
All right. So we'll just get everybody to stand by then as we wind things down. Thanks to Captain Long John Sinclair. Everyone, we had as many as 8 people actually joining us here as we streamed the show out live. The 2 Pirate Joes, as always, of course, along with Augie Nost, Swordpoint 9, Johnny Canuck. Hope we're not missing anyone. Psycho Fire, that's a new face. As well as we've got here Joey's TCAP, which stands for To Catch a Predator. Not too clear on his history or what his whole thing is all about, but he's talking about here how apparently the deep state is fucking with his internet connection. Well, you wouldn't be the only one, Joey, so welcome to the club. Yeah, we're going to actually move on out of here then and sail on into the after show. Let's not forget, though, before we do, to remind listeners that we can once again be found on multiple social media platforms, including Twitter, Facebook, and Minds.com. So just do a little search for Pirate Radio Podcasts or Pirate Radio Network, WPRPN, and it should be all pretty straightforward and easy to follow from that point. Thanks, everybody, for joining us and tuning in. Your support is very much appreciated. Patreon.com, we've got a little account over there too as well. So let's not forget, if you're interested in helping the show out a little more, it does, as Robert did talk about earlier, take a lot of time and effort to put these episodes, each of them, together. So every little bit of sponsorship and support that we can pick up is very much appreciated. And you really do end up having a stake in things. We do listen to you and your opinions and your voices as best we can, even just $1 per item of premium content. And that's what we're going to be producing here right now, folks, with the Rogues Gallery After Show. That's what goes into Patreon. Those are the sort of items you find over there. So we've got people that even have pledged as much as $5 an item. So speaking of which, just before we wrap things up here, we are looking for more tech navvies, people that are willing to tackle the post-production end of things and help to get this Patreon content out there. Right now, as it is, we're having a lot of difficulty, really. We're swamped, and just calling for all hands on deck here. We're managing to get that weekly show out in post-production form. We've also made the transition from Podomatic over to archive.org. I'm not sure what the deal is with Podomatic. They just can't seem to get their act together over on that platform for some reason. So, and they're not really, they're kind of, some people say ghosting us, not returning our calls at this point anymore, as used to be the case. But yeah, we're going to sail on out of here, folks, and head on into the Rogues Gallery After Show. In the meantime, and I should say a little bit before we do that about the May calendar, just in brief here, that we've got next week Robert Vandenbroek, the self-professed psychic medium, crop circle, and UFO enthusiast, who has been scheduled to join us. We're not too clear if he's going to be dropping by, in fact, or not. We'll see about that. That's kind of up in the air right now. He did commit to do the show, but there's a few things going on behind the scenes here where, because of having to face the light of scrutiny, we really had no intention of giving him too rough of a ride. We like to treat all of our guests with respect, and there's a reason we invite people to join us here on the Robin Hood. So we'll see what happens there, whether he manages to show up or not. But Jaybird Princess Wells as well, decked out there in all her Star Wars Jedi finest. She's an independent author of science fiction, along with a multitude of other things as well, too. So we're looking forward to talking to her the following week on the 18th. And finally, rounding things off here, our friend and fellow matey, Kaiser Schuff. Really looking forward to that. We're going to go into how it is that we managed to reconnect here via the web, particularly minds.com, along with a whole number of, a little bit of geopolitics, actually, and issues relating, believe it or not, to the Korean Peninsula here, and how we kind of ended up, because myself just paying attention to what was going on in the news and following things maybe a little closer than some people, seeing and kind of having an idea of what was unfolding on the Korean Peninsula. We'll be going into that a little bit, and just, really look forward to the conversation that we'll be able to present to the public on the 25th. In the meantime, though, folks, thank you once again for joining us here, episode 106 with Robert Homrich. That about does it. Until we meet again out on the high digital seas, I'm your host, as always, the ship's chief communications officer, Jaffe Ryder.
I know. There we be. Having carefully looked over each of our navigation panel instruments, checking every level, switch, dial, cable, knob, and pulley, by all accounts and indications, we indeed see it's time once again to drop anchor inside Mystic Bay and draw an end to another week of Pirate Radio podcasts. Remember, if you're looking for a little more lively online action, keep in mind we've likely got yet another great free-flowing Rogues Gallery After Show coming up for the next hour in either Skype
Google Hangouts, or appear.in. Also, if you've in any way enjoyed or found yourself benefiting from the shows we've tirelessly produced over the past 2 years, you might want to drop by our Patreon tip jar page and lend a little support. Half of all network donations go directly to charity. Help to keep those numbers growing over on Patreon, and we'll be able to extend even more of a generous pirate hand. Looking forward now to the balance of 2018, we're still not quite yet booked. So if you yourself have a new, novel, intriguing, or otherwise underreported idea, unique individual, or pressing item in mind, be sure to either drop us a line directly over on WPRPN.com or fire us a quick email via pirateoneradio@gmail.com. We're always open to exploring fresh creative suggestions, intriguing guest ideas, cutting-edge discussion topics, and captivating themes. You can further embark on your own personal pirate journey by either liking, commenting on, subscribing to, or just following us via virtually any mainstream social media platform, including Twitter, Facebook, Google+, or Minds.com. So don't forget to become engaged. Until we meet again out on the high digital seas, I'm your host as always, the ship's Chief Communications Officer, Jaffe Ryder. Tally-ho.